What happens when a black CEO arrives at the stairs of his own $22 million jet, only to be stopped, questioned, and nearly thrown off by the pilot who didn't recognize him? What unfolds next isn't a shouting match, but a quiet, unforgettable lesson in dignity, power, and legacy. This is the true story of how standing still spoke louder than words. The wind coming off the tarmac at Van Nuys Airport carried that dry California heat, the kind that stuck to your skin and turned the asphalt into a low-simmering skillet. It was just past 8:30 a.m. when Malcolm Hayes pulled into the lot behind Hangar 12, his blacked-out Audi Q8 sliding into an unmarked space with the quiet confidence of someone who didn't need to prove a damn thing. He cut the engine, rolled his neck once, and exhaled. Everything about him said calm control: navy leather bomber jacket over a crisp black tee, dark jeans that fit just right, and sneakers so clean they could have been unboxed 5 minutes ago. A pair of sunglasses tucked into his collar, not for show, just out of habit. Malcolm didn't rush. He never did. 48 years old, founder and CEO of Hayes Aero Group, a man who built a multi-million-dollar aviation firm from scratch. The type of man whose time was rarely questioned and whose name opened doors before he even reached them. And yet, the irony wasn't lost on him that today, on his own tarmac, in front of his own jet, he was about to be treated like he didn't belong. The Gulfstream G650 sat waiting, stairs down, engines humming low, its polished silver fuselage catching the sun like a promise in midair. He was flying to St. Louis for a logistics summit, same as he did every quarter, touching base with partners and suppliers. This wasn't new. This wasn't unusual. But the way the day unfolded? That was different. As Malcolm approached the aircraft, his phone buzzed. A text from his assistant, meeting with Capstone pushed to 4. Safe flight, M. He slid the phone back into his pocket just as a voice cut through the air like a switchblade. Excuse me, sir. Malcolm slowed but didn't stop, turning just slightly toward the voice. A man in a flight uniform, tall, mid-40s maybe, white, sharp jaw, aviator glasses, was walking straight toward him, a clipboard in one hand, radio on his hip. The posture said it all. Authority, suspicion, challenge. Can I help you with something? Malcolm asked, his tone neutral. Not defensive. Just curious. This aircraft is scheduled for a private flight, the man said, eyes narrowing behind the lenses. I'm going to need to see some ID and confirmation. We can't allow unauthorized personnel near the plane. For a split second, Malcolm thought it might be a misunderstanding. But there was no hesitation in the man's face. No confusion. Just the kind of certainty that came from years of believing you could read a man by his outfit. Malcolm raised an eyebrow. I own the plane, he said calmly. I'm flying to Missouri this morning. Right, the man said flatly. And I'm the Secretary of Transportation. Malcolm gave a soft, short laugh. The kind that didn't break the tension, just measured it. You can call dispatch, he said. My name's on the manifest. But the man wasn't interested in checking. He crossed his arms. Look, I don't care who you say you are. You're not boarding this aircraft until someone above me clears it. Step back from the jet, now. Malcolm didn't move. He didn't raise his voice. His hands remained loose by his sides. But something in his stillness made the other man uncomfortable. You're going to feel really stupid in about 2 minutes, Malcolm said, quiet as smoke. The man, Captain Bradley Moore, according to the name stitched onto his chest, snorted. I doubt it. Malcolm pulled out his phone and dialed. 2 rings. Yeah, it's me, he said into the receiver. You might want to get someone on the line with your Van Nuys captain. He's blocking me from boarding. A pause. No. No idea who I am. Another pause. Yeah, I'll wait. He ended the call just as a black SUV with tinted windows and a security decal pulled up behind him. 2 guards stepped out, scanning the area. Captain Moore waved them over. This guy claims he owns the plane, Moore said, gesturing. Refused to show ID. I didn't want to take any chances. One of the guards looked at Malcolm, squinted, then straightened slightly. Wait, are you Mr. Hayes? Malcolm nodded once. That's right. The guard turned back to Moore. Sir, you might want to get on the line with dispatch. Like now. Moore blinked, glancing between them. Wait. You're who? Malcolm Hayes, he said, tone still even. CEO of Hayes Aero Group. Moore let out a disbelieving laugh. What, you're some kind of investor? Malcolm stepped closer, locking eyes. No. I own the company. The silence hit harder than any shouting ever could. Moore's mouth opened, then closed again. One of the guards was already speaking into his radio, relaying what just happened. The other stood by Malcolm, protective now, posture different. Moore was floundering. I've been in aviation for 20 years, he muttered. When someone shows up in jeans and a hoodie, it just doesn't track. And there it was. Malcolm didn't respond right away. Just steadied him. Measured the way his hands twitched, the slight flush creeping up his neck. Maybe, Malcolm said at last, you need to reevaluate how you measure people. Power doesn't always look like what you're used to. His phone buzzed. He answered it, stepping a few feet away. Yeah, he's still standing here, he said into the receiver. I'll wait. The security guard stepped toward Moore. You need to speak with Base. Now. Moore raised his radio reluctantly. Base, this is Captain Moore at Hangar 12. I've got a man here claiming he's the owner of Hayes Aero. Name's Malcolm Hayes. There was silence. Then a voice crackled back, too faint to catch the words. But whatever was said made Moore go stiff. Yes, sir, he mumbled. Understood. He turned slowly toward Malcolm, eyes wide now. There must have been a miscommunication, he said, voice faltering. I wasn't informed the owner would be boarding today. Didn't know I needed to RSVP to my own plane, Malcolm replied. His voice hadn't changed. Still calm. Still razor sharp. Another voice crackled through Moore's radio, louder this time. Captain Moore, you are relieved of duty immediately. Do not proceed with this flight. Moore's face went pale. He took a step back, staring at his radio like he wanted it to unsay the words. But it didn't. It wouldn't. Malcolm turned to him. Now you know. Moore didn't say another word. Just walked away, shoulders slumped, like the ground had shifted beneath him. The guards nodded at Malcolm. We're good, sir. We're good, Malcolm said. One of the guards returned to the SUV. The other lingered, watching Moore disappear into the terminal. A young co-pilot, 20-something, wide-eyed, had been standing near the top of the stairs, watching everything. Now he stepped down, nodding respectfully. Sorry about that, Mr. Hayes, he said. Malcolm nodded once. You flying today? If you want me to, sir. Malcolm steadied him, then gave a short nod. Then let's get in the air. The cabin was cool, minimalist, spotless. Cream leather, walnut paneling, no flash. Just taste. Malcolm dropped his overnight bag on the nearest seat and sat down, rolling up one sleeve, unlocking his tablet. The door sealed shut with a hiss, and the hum of pre-flight systems filled the space. Outside, the tarmac shimmered. Inside, Malcolm barely blinked. He wasn't thinking about Captain Moore anymore. Not really. He was thinking about the first time he boarded a private jet and felt unwelcome. About why he bought the company in the first place. Not to prove a point. To rewrite the rules. The jet began to taxi. Malcolm looked up from his screen, out toward the clear blue morning. And though the wheels hadn't yet left the ground, word of what had happened was already flying faster than anything on that runway. 3 hours into the flight, cruising at 41,000 feet somewhere over New Mexico, Malcolm Hayes sat alone in the sleek silence of his Gulfstream G650 cabin, fingers resting against his temple, eyes fixed on the pale blue horizon beyond the oval window. The sun was sharp and high, but his thoughts were elsewhere, anchored not in the altitude but in the memory of that morning. Captain Bradley Moore's face still lingered in the back of his mind, not out of anger, but recognition. The look of a man who wasn't just caught off guard but undone by his own assumptions. Malcolm hadn't flinched, hadn't raised his voice, hadn't needed to. Because the moment spoke for itself. But what most people didn't know, what even the crew didn't know, was that today's incident wasn't the first time Malcolm had been told, without words, that he didn't belong. It wasn't even the worst. It was just the most public. Months earlier, on a red-eye charter from Phoenix to Boston, Malcolm had boarded another private jet, not his own, not yet, just another aircraft booked through a premium service his company occasionally used. He had just wrapped up a tense contract renegotiation with a supplier in Tempe. Nothing flashy, no entourage, just Malcolm and his laptop. When he boarded the plane that night, the pilot, a different man, younger, with a practiced smile that never quite reached his eyes, offered a clipped welcome aboard without looking up. There was no offer to take his bag. No greeting beyond that. During the flight, service was slow. Polite, but cold. Malcolm noticed how the crew addressed his assistant like she was the decision-maker, never asking him directly. And when they landed in Boston, the pilot shook hands with another passenger before walking right past Malcolm without a word. Not hostile. Just invisible. That was the part that stayed with him. The absence of acknowledgement. The unspoken question, what's he doing here? He didn't file a complaint. He didn't ask for an apology. Instead, he went home, poured 2 fingers of 16-year-old Lagavulin, sat back on the deck of his Oakland house, and stared out at the city lights. Then, without saying a word to anyone, he picked up the phone and called Maxine, his longtime attorney and partner in quiet acquisitions. "Find out who owns the charter service I used last night," he said. Discreetly. "I want it locked in before the end of the month." She didn't question it. Maxine knew Malcolm. She'd helped him buy everything from a fiber optics firm in Nevada to a boutique hotel group in Santa Barbara. Always clean. Always under the radar. 6 weeks later, Hayes Aero Group quietly acquired a majority stake in Skyfront Charters through a blind trust. The press never caught it. The staff didn't even know there'd been a change in ownership. Malcolm didn't care about the headlines. He cared about the standard. The first thing he did was shift leadership. The second was retraining the operations team. Not on safety, not on fuel margins, but on culture. He didn't need them to know his face. He just needed to know that the next time a black client boarded a $20 million jet, nobody would look at them like they were in the wrong seat. And then, just when he thought he might be done with it, Van Nuys happened. The stairwell. Captain Moore. The way the man's face folded in on itself when the radio buzzed and the truth hit him like turbulence. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't even personal. It was predictable. And it was exactly why Malcolm had bought the sky in the first place. The video, of course, was never meant to go viral. Someone, maybe a line tech, maybe a ground handler, had filmed it quietly from behind a fuel truck. 47 seconds of footage that showed Malcolm standing calmly while a uniformed white pilot tried to block his access to his own jet. The audio was shaky, but clear enough to hear the line that broke the internet. Maybe you just can't recognize power when it doesn't look like what you're used to. By the time Malcolm touched down in St. Louis, it was already climbing Twitter trends. Hashtag spread like brushfire, hashtag Malcolm Hayes, hashtag Jetgate, hashtag this is why we buy. CNN picked it up within the hour. A freeze frame of Malcolm mid-sentence, sunglasses in hand, calm as ever. Think pieces followed. Some praising his composure. Others questioning whether the pilot was just doing his job. But Malcolm? He didn't say a word. He didn't issue a statement. No press release. No interview. Just one internal email to his entire company. It read simply, "Let our behavior speak louder than our brand. Our culture is our logo. Protect both." He didn't sign it. He didn't need to. The message was unmistakably his. Over the next 72 hours, the story spiraled. Clients called. Partners reached out. Some asking if he was okay. Others offering public solidarity. A few, carefully worded, hinted that maybe he should set the record straight. But Malcolm never chased the narrative. He let it do what it would. Because that wasn't the chapter that mattered. What mattered was what came next. That same week, he convened his executive team for a private call. No agenda. Just a question: what kind of company do we want to be when nobody's watching? It wasn't rhetorical. It was structural. And it became the foundation of a quiet campaign, one that didn't roll out with banners or press tours, but with policy. Malcolm launched an internal program called Vision at Altitude, a new training initiative centered on inclusive professionalism, client perception, and implicit bias recognition. Every team, from pilots to dispatch, went through it. Not optional. Not decorative. Core. He expanded the hiring board, diversified the leadership pipeline, and put anonymous review systems in place to protect whistleblowers. Not because it looked good. Because it was necessary. Meanwhile, the video kept climbing. It appeared on The View, The Today Show, even a late-night monologue. Imagine owning a $22 million jet, one host. Quipped, and still getting stopped at the stairs. Jeff Bezos could show up in pajamas and they'd roll out champagne. The room laughed. America winced. And Malcolm? He just kept moving. In private. With purpose. He wasn't angry. He was focused. Because he knew this moment wasn't about clapping back. It was about clearing a path. For the next Malcolm. The next entrepreneur. The next black client who didn't want to be treated like a guest in their own success. 3 weeks later, he received a letter. Handwritten. No return address. Inside was a single sheet. Mr. Hayes, it read, I work ramp crew at a small regional in New Jersey. Saw your video. I've been passed over 3 times for lead because the boss said I wasn't polished enough. Just wanted you to know, I'm still here. Still grinding. And now, thanks to you, I'm standing a little taller. Sincerely, R. Malcolm read it twice. Then he folded it carefully, tucked it into a drawer next to his desk, and leaned back in his chair. He didn't need applause. He needed to build something that outlasted him. Because that's the thing about power when it's quiet. It doesn't just speak. It echoes. And for Malcolm Hayes, that echo had only just begun. 3 days after the video reached 10 million views, Malcolm Hayes sat alone in his downtown Oakland office, the city lights flickering across the glass walls like the last embers of a storm still burning beyond the horizon. The letter from the ramp agent in New Jersey still sat on his desk, unfolded, with a small coffee stain in the corner, as if even the mailroom knew it wasn't just another piece of fan mail. He hadn't responded, but he'd read it 6 times. Each word pressed into his thoughts like fingerprints on steel. Thanks for standing there. For not backing down. We saw it. All of us. That line echoed in the silence. It was the same echo that had been following him ever since the incident at Van Nuys. The world had gone loud, but Malcolm hadn't. He hadn't needed to. He'd already said everything he meant to say, by saying nothing at all. He declined every interview. Ignored every speaking request. Let the headlines rise and fall like tides. But behind closed doors, he moved. Quietly. Powerfully. Purposefully. Within a week, the internal team at Hayes Aero Group rolled out a new training directive titled Vision at Altitude, Beyond Service, Toward Respect. Not some surface-level PR mask, not a check-the-box DEI seminar. This was deep. Experiential. Transformative. It challenged every employee, from captains to customer support, to interrogate their assumptions, rethink their interactions, and recenter respect as the default, not the exception. Malcolm didn't need applause for it. He needed standards. And he made that clear from day one. Meanwhile, the emails poured in. Not from journalists or influencers, but from janitors, loaders, dispatchers, young pilots just breaking into the industry. "You spoke for us, and you didn't even speak," one wrote. Another simply said, "Thank you for not losing your cool. You didn't just win, you taught." It wasn't just those in aviation. One message came from a middle school teacher in Atlanta. "My students saw that clip. We talked about it for 45 minutes. They'd never seen power held like that, without shouting, without rage. Just held. That stayed with them. That stayed with me." Malcolm read each one, not for validation, but for clarity. Because it wasn't about him anymore. It never really had been. It was about how many people had walked up those metaphorical stairs and been stopped. How many turned back? How many didn't come back at all? So when Captain Moore sent his formal apology, an email routed through legal and HR, polite, tightly worded, strategic, Malcolm didn't hesitate. He refused it. Not out of spite. Out of principle. In his follow-up to the executive team, his message was sharp, unwavering. Captain Moore will not return to Hayes Aero Group in any capacity, now or ever. We don't build bridges with borrowed regret. He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. A few days later, Moore's resignation hit industry boards. Quietly, respectfully, like most endings in aviation. But people noticed. Internally, Malcolm commissioned an overhaul of the company's hiring and promotion framework. He removed legacy gatekeeping in the pilot advancement track. He implemented a mentorship program that paired seasoned flight crew with aspiring professionals from underrepresented backgrounds. Not just to teach them, he said in a memo, but to learn from them. Empathy only scales if it listens on the way up. He didn't give a speech. He sent a 4-line directive. His people understood. And then there were the conversations he sparked, not the public ones, but the ones whispered in hangars, during post-flight briefings, and staff lounges. Crews talking about the ways they dismissed people without even meaning to. Ground staff revisiting the way they looked at each name on a manifest. Culture doesn't change overnight. But it shifts when it has to. And Malcolm had given it the push. At one point, a group of regional operators requested he lead a virtual panel. He declined the spotlight but funded a full-day summit instead, hosted anonymously, sponsored quietly, designed to bring together voices that rarely got airtime. One of the speakers was a young black woman from Memphis who'd been turned down by 3 charter companies before becoming a private jet mechanic. She told her story. Everyone listened. Nobody interrupted. That was the real currency of the movement, not visibility, but voice. Malcolm kept building. Quietly, consistently, with the same rhythm that had gotten him from food stamps in high school to CEO of a jet company he once couldn't afford to fly with. Then, on a cool Friday evening 2 months after the incident, Malcolm returned to Van Nuys. Not for press. Not for a photo op. Just because he needed to see it again. The jet was parked exactly where it had been. Hangar 12. Same sky. Same tarmac. Same polished stairwell gleaming in the California light. He walked toward it slowly, alone, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a file folder filled with nothing but checklists and maintenance notes. No cameras. No noise. Just him. He stood at the base of the stairs. Looked up. Let the silence do what it always had, tell the truth. He didn't touch the railing. Didn't need to climb. He just stood there, breathing in the space where it all had shifted. And for the first time in a long time, he smiled, not wide, not performative, just enough to register. This jet, this company, this movement, it wasn't about the insult anymore. It was about what grew from it. What had been planted when he chose not to react but to respond. Not with rage, but with redirection. Not with shame, but with structure. After a long moment, he turned around and walked away. No speech. No second glance. Just that same quiet power that had stunned a pilot, rallied a crew, and rippled across an industry. As he reached the gate, a line tech spotted him from a distance and gave a small nod. Malcolm returned it. Just once. That was enough. And in that final stillness, as the shadows stretched across the runway and the wind moved without fanfare, his last words from that morning echoed back, not through microphones or headlines, but through memory. Real power doesn't need attention. It just needs to stand still when the world expects you to bow. As the author of this story, I want to take a moment to step back from the tarmac, from the private jets and viral clips, and speak directly to you, the listener, the viewer, the person who just walked with Malcolm Hayes through this quiet storm. This story wasn't just about a man being stopped at the stairs of his own jet. It was about how often power is misread when it wears humility instead of arrogance, denim instead of tailored wool, silence instead of outrage. Malcolm didn't respond with a press conference, a tirade, or a demand for attention. He responded with presence, with clarity, with action behind the scenes. And in that stillness, he taught us something critical. Sometimes the most powerful protest isn't loud, it's immovable. The lesson here isn't just for those who carry titles. It's for anyone who has ever been doubted, dismissed, or underestimated. You don't have to shout to be heard. You don't have to perform your worth for someone else's comfort. Stand in your truth, hold your ground, and let the results speak. Let your legacy speak. But it's also a lesson for those of us in positions of influence, whether in leadership, business, or community. We must ask ourselves, how do we treat those who don't look the part? What biases do we carry into our decisions, our greetings, our assumptions? Culture isn't shaped by slogans or corporate policies. It's shaped by moments like this one, where we choose to either uphold the dignity of others or deny it because of our own blind spots. To those listening today who've ever had to work twice as hard to prove they belonged in a room they built, this story is for you. Keep building. Keep standing. And when you do speak, let it be rooted in purpose, not permission. On behalf of U.S. Instructive Stories, thank you for taking the time to experience this journey. We don't just tell stories, we reflect on what they mean. If this message stirred something in you, don't let it fade when the video ends. Share it. Talk about it. Look at the world around you a little closer. Because change doesn't always start with a crowd. Sometimes, it starts with one man refusing to step down from his own jet. Thanks for listening. Stay grounded. Stay strong. And as always, keep learning, keep growing, and we'll see you in the next story.